Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Travis Walton? His story about alien abduction was the inspiration for a book titled The Walton Experience and the 1993 movie Fire in the Sky. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. Travis Walton has been interviewed a number of times, including his appearance on the Rogan Experience in January of 2021. I watched this interview. It was over 2 hours long. I found it interesting, but Walton left quite a bit out of the story. I had to use a number of other sources to fill in the narrative. So I'll talk about Travis Walton and his story, and then I'll offer my analysis. In 1975, Travis Walton was 22 years old and worked as a logger in Arizona. On November 5, 1975, he was working in a forest near Snowflake, Arizona, along with 6 other people. All of the workers were young. The age range was 17 to 25, and all were male. Around 6:15 p.m., they finished working for the day, and they were driving out of the forest in a truck. Here I will describe the claims that Walton and his co-workers made. They claimed that they saw a golden glow in a clearing. It was mind-blowing. As they approached the source of the light, it appeared to be a spacecraft that was small and disc-like. Walton exited the truck and ran toward the object, which was making noise that was getting louder. Walton ducked behind a log. He was only 8 or 10 feet away from the object. At this point, an energy discharge made contact with him. His coworkers said that he was zapped. Initially, his coworkers ran away, but they returned not long after. Walton was nowhere to be found. The police initially thought that the coworkers had killed Walton, but then they quickly focused on the idea that this was a hoax, and Walton would turn up later. Walton claimed that he woke up in what seemed to be a spacecraft. He was on this table. He felt as though he was dying. He noticed that there were aliens standing around him. They had 2 large eyes, were hairless, expressionless, and did not talk. Walton was panicking and combative. He attacked the alien closest to him, knocking him back easily. After this, 3 aliens approached him. He grabbed a clear cylinder, like a beaker, from a shelf behind him and swung it wildly, threatening the aliens. In response, they retreated. I guess they had never been confronted with something that dangerous before in their years of space travel, or maybe they left their beaker-resistant vests in their other spacecraft. At this point, a human-looking entity enters the room. Walton theorized that it could be a visitor, so he thought maybe this human was visiting the spacecraft. So I found this interesting. It's like the aliens are standing around wondering how to calm Walton down. One of them turns to another and says, "Hey, isn't Steve a human?" "Why, yes, I think he is." "Well, go get him." Now, if we're running under this theory that Walton would later put forth, that the aliens felt bad for injuring him and they're trying to help him, this would be like a guy hitting a deer in his automobile, being frustrated because the deer was panicking, and turning to his wife and saying, "Isn't your friend Bambi a deer? Call her up." Back to Walton's story. The human was wearing a blue uniform, a clear helmet like a fishbowl. He was physically strong and had long hair. Walton starts screaming. This new creature, the human-like creature, takes Walton out of the craft into another structure that may have been like a larger ship, like a spacecraft carrier, or some type of base. They put him on another table. A human female, or a creature that appeared to be human, put a mask on him, and he was rendered unconscious. The next thing that Walton knows, he wakes up in the woods about 30 miles away from the alleged abduction site. This was on November 11. He walked to a phone booth and called his sister. So we see that people did try to verify Walton's story. They talked to the coworkers, who largely corroborated Walton's narrative, but of course they didn't claim to be on the spacecraft with him. Walton said that it's incredible that people don't believe 7 witnesses, noting that it would likely be good enough to convict a person of murder. Well, he's got a point, but murder actually happens, and, as we will find out, these were not credible witnesses. Walton said his experience was traumatizing, but he doesn't want to inspire fear. He doesn't believe the aliens were bad or evil. They were probably trying to fix the damage they caused to him when he was struck by their energy discharge. Walton discussed how the government knows more than us, but they are doing the best they can, so the government is sort of evil, but not entirely evil. He suggested there was a cover-up. He talked about military reports. He claimed that one of the witnesses was offered $10,000 to keep quiet, perhaps by the CIA. Walton noted that Bob Lazar described the same spacecraft. Walton talked about two experiences that he believes are connected to the abduction, a dream he had when he was a kid and an experience as an adult. In the dream he had when he was young, he said he woke up in the middle of the night. Everybody was asleep in this hallway because it was hot in the house, so that's where they were sleeping. He felt something lifting the bedroll under his feet. He woke up and saw a little, hairless man with a big head and eyes wearing a black suit. He was never able to find this man. As far as the experience when he was an adult, he told Joe Rogan, "I shouldn't tell you this," which was a sure sign that he was going to tell him. In this story, once again, it was the middle of the night and everybody was asleep. Walton finds himself running just like that, just out of nowhere. He was waking up as he was running. He goes into his son's room and finds him choking on the crib railing. Walton saves his life. So it's like Walton had a guardian alien. Walton said that every theory the skeptics come up with is false. They have crazy theories about his claims. Here we see a textbook definition of gaslighting. Walton also indicated that there is a movie remake of Fire in the Sky in the planning stage. What could be going on in a situation like this? Was this a hoax, or did Walton really encounter aliens? Some people do believe Walton's story. They say things like, what incentive did he have to lie? And even if he did have an incentive, his coworkers did not have one. They dismiss the compelling evidence that this was a hoax. Let's take a look at the evidence pointing to the idea that this story was made up. All of the coworkers were young and perhaps sensation-seeking. They waited 2 hours to report the incident to the police. This seems a bit unusual. Your friend is zapped by some sort of alien spacecraft, and you sit around for 2 hours before notifying the authorities? There's been a lot of discussion about the polygraph results. Allegedly, Walton passed a polygraph, and 5 of the 6 coworkers did as well. Polygraphs are pseudoscientific nonsense. I've talked about this before. It doesn't matter what the results were, pass or fail, doesn't mean anything. But I think what does matter is Walton's behavior in reference to the polygraphs. Walton failed a polygraph 10 days after the incident. The examiner indicated that Walton had tried to distort his respiration pattern in an attempt to deceive the examiner. Why try to deceive the examiner if one is telling the truth? Now, there was a second polygraph administered about 3 months later. Reportedly, Walton passed this one after denying any knowledge about the first one. This could speak to his credibility, but there's other information about his credibility as well. It was reported that Walton and a friend of his named Charles Rogers pleaded guilty to first-degree burglary and forgery charges in May of 1971. Charles was one of the workers present during the incident. He was the younger brother of Michael Rogers. He was the leader of this team. Walton and Charles Rogers had stolen and forged checks. They were permitted to plead guilty, make restitution, and then retract their guilty pleas and enter not guilty pleas. This was so their criminal records could be cleared. Walton had a prior interest in UFOs. His friends described him as a UFO freak, saying that he had been preoccupied with them for almost his entire life. How convenient that he would then get to ride in a UFO. What about the idea that these men did not have any incentive to perpetrate a hoax? This has been put forward as a reason their claims could be true. As it turns out, there was a financial incentive to make up this story. As I mentioned, Michael Rogers was the leader of the group. He had this contract with the U.S. Forest Service for timber thinning. He had underbid the project significantly and was running behind schedule. He had already requested one extension, which resulted in a $1 penalty per acre that was completed under the extension. His rate per acre was around $27, so he was losing one of those $27 for each of those acres. The completion deadline was November 10. just 5 days after the incident. If they had not completed the work, he would have been penalized again. In addition, the Forest Service was holding 10% of the payments until the job was completed. Winter was approaching, and Rogers would have had to finish the job in the spring in order to collect his money. So he would have been waiting a long time to get that money. Perpetrating the hoax would mean that Rogers would have a legal basis to say, I can't go back in the forest. I'm afraid. There are UFOs flying around, and that could be dangerous. Please terminate the contract. This is exactly what happened 13 days after the incident. After the remaining contract was awarded to another company, Rogers was paid the money that had been withheld. Moving to the next point, the question comes up, why would Walton pick this particular story, other than his interest in UFOs? On October 20, 1975, about 2 weeks before this incident, NBC televised a 2-hour special titled The UFO Incident. This was a story of the famous 1961 Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction claim. Walton admitted that he saw the special. It is reasonable to believe that his coworkers did as well, or he made them aware of it. This brings me to my last point, the odd reactions of his family members. When the police explained to Walton's family members that he could not be found, we see a few interesting responses suggesting they might have known what he was planning. His mother did not seem very surprised. A search party was organized. She was part of it, but she wanted to give up early, saying, I just don't think there's any use in looking any further. I don't think he is on this earth. Walton's brother didn't seem concerned either. He said UFOs always bring the victims back to the same spot. So he had a lot of confidence in the aliens. So what are my thoughts here on this case? I believe that Walton and his coworkers were lying. This was a hoax. There is no incentive for any of them at this point to come forward and say this was all a lie. So they just keep maintaining the story. There are many reasons that people claim that they were abducted by aliens. Some have to do with mental health and cognitive factors, but this case appears to be simply deception. I'll record another video where I talk about people who make these claims who are not trying to be deceptive, those who have delusions or quasi-delusions. The lesson learned in this case is that even though the story is obviously fabricated, there will always be people who lack critical thinking skills and need to believe that aliens run around zapping people, repairing them, and dropping them off, leaving no evidence of the visit behind. Those are my thoughts on the Travis Walton case. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.